Good afternoon. My name is Phillipine, and I am at Camp Aguinaldo in Quezon City because a few minutes ago, AFP Chief General Romeo Bronner Jr. officially opened the 39th iteration of Balikatan, the Balikatan Joint Exercise or Exercise Balikatan for 2024. First, ano ba tong Balikatan na to? Yung Balikatan is a yearly exercise between the Philippines and the United States. Officials from both sides will tell you this is proof that the Mutual Defense Treaty or yung pangako ng US at ng Pilipinas na if any of or they will come to each other's defense in the event of a armed attack from another nation. So parang the way they frame this is that the Balikatan or these joint exercises is the embodiment or yung proof na hindi lamang papel yung deal na ito. They refer to the 2024 Balikatan as, quote, the most ambitious, most effective, and most complicated among the iterations of these joint exercises so far. That's according to Lieutenant General William M. Journey, the U.S. Exercise Director for this year's Balikatan. Now, we'll walk you through for this live recap. No? We'll walk you through where Balikatan is taking place, who's part of Balikatan, and then most importantly siguro, ano ba ang point ng Balikatan and what does this do for the Philippines' defense posturing and more broadly, no, yung thrust ng Philippines towards territorial defense as opposed to its focus in the past few decades, which is internal security. Now, we will see over 11,000 American troops and 5,000 troops of the AFP or the Armed Forces of the Philippines participating in different exercises across the country. 150 Australian Defense Forces are also here or will be here, as well as 100 French Navy personnel will be participating in this year's Balikatan. So yung venue ng exercise na ito, Batanes, the northernmost part of the Philippines. There will also be activities in Zambales, in Palawan facing the West Philippine Sea, and Ilocos Norte, which just happens to be the home province of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, what happens during Balikatan? Siguro yung mas familiar yung karaniwang tao dito is yung mga field training exercises or yung nakikita natin na may mga live firing of assets both of the US and the Philippines, and that will happen in this year's iteration of Balikatan. In Palawan, for instance, merong land exercise and sea exercise, maritime exercises. In Ilocos Norte will be kumbaga the highlight of the 2-week-long exercise. By the way, Balikatan runs from today up until May 10. So that's over 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks actually of exercises between the US and the Philippines. So baka nagtataka kayo bakit may ibang nations dito. So meron din ganang instances where a much smaller force from other countries will be flying in or sailing into the Philippines to join these exercises. In the case of France, they will be participating solely in the MME or the multinational or multilateral maritime exercise. So for the first time ever, this is happening in Palawan, by the way, for the first time ever, magve-venture beyond the territorial seas of the Philippines yung joint sail or the MME ng Balikatan. Normally kasi it's just within the 24 to 12 nautical mile zone, territorial waters pa yun ng Pilipinas. This time they're venturing further away and into the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea, of course, which is where a lot of tension is brewing between the Philippines and China. We'll talk about China more in a little bit. And then bukod sa MME na ito, magkakaroon ng joint bilateral or ng bilateral sale ang Philippines at French Navy. Pero ibang activity yon that's outside of Balikatan itself. Now, aside from the FTX, which is most likely what you would see in the news, no, when we talk about Balikatan, mayroon ding information and cyber exercises. When we ask the US and Philippine officials kung ano yung scenarios that they are perhaps preparing for in these information and cyber exercises, they were understandably vague na parang kung baga they are just parang what they were saying is that these exercises address the complexities of the current situation or security and defense situation. Of course, referring to disinformation, perhaps misinformation. But they did say that it won't involve only the military personnel of the U.S. and the Philippines. In fact, kasama dito PCO, the Presidential Communications Office, the DND, Department of National Defense, and even the Department of Foreign Affairs sa information exercises ng Balikatan 2024. Aside from the 5,000 from the AFP, 11,000 from the US, 150 from Australia, and 100 from the French Navy, there will be 14 nations represented in Balikatan as observers. So, observers. So titingin lang sila at they won't be actually part of the exercise, but they will be seeing what happens during these yung different exercises all across the country. So yung 14 na ito includes ASEAN nations or members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Yung parating sinasabi during the opening and the press briefing after, no, is that this year's Balikatan, again, is the most challenging daw and most complex. And you might be wondering, what does it mean when they say it's more complex? Perhaps yung emblematic of the complexity of this year's Balikatan is the fact na aside from the involvement of the Philippine National Police, mga ilang Balikatans ago na rin, kasama na rin sila sa joint drills na ito. For the first time ever, the Philippine Coast Guard will be joining the Balikatan through the MME sa West Philippine Sea sa Palawan. More or less, they will be serving as the security for the exercise as the different navies. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 Philippine Navy ships, 1 ship from France and 1 ship from the US will be conducting 3 different kinds of drills in the West Philippine Sea. So the PCG will be serving as their security. Now, why is that relevant? You have to remember that the PCG, aside from the Philippine Navy, of course, serves as one of the frontliners of the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea amid China's continued aggressive actions in our waters. So parang, if you ask them if this has anything to do with the current situation in the South China Sea, of course they'll tell you right away that the Balikatan is not a response or is not a practice for any specific country, but rather it focuses on the cooperation of the Philippines and the US and what the Philippines needs in the context of its defense needs. But you have to understand also that context. So when we talk about complexity, yung pagka-describe sa amin ni Lieutenant General Journey is that coordination for operations out at sea, for instance, or even at inland, such as the exercises that will be happening during Balikatan. It's not as easy as, say, creating a group chat on WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. It involves a lot of sophisticated instruments that communicate with each other. So, for example, when you're trying to sink a ship, which is one of the exercises that will be happening in Balikatan, dito sa Ilocos Norte, sa Paway, hindi siya as simple as parang you just tell or like one or the asset that has the missile will launch the missile. Like you have to make sure that all the units involved, not just the US and the Philippines, but all the units within the Philippines and within the US structure are able to communicate effectively. So you can perhaps with that example understand kung gaano kahirap din yung level of coordination or the ambition that they set in the drills of Balikatan. So again, anong point ng Balikatan? You want your militaries, in this case, treaty allies, the Philippines and the US, as well as countries, like-minded countries that also stand for, let's say, the rule of law, international law, stability and safety in the Indo-Pacific. It's a way for them to be prepared to work together in case of an emergency or in case of need. And this doesn't just refer to a military operation, but even yung yung disaster response. And that's what the U.S. officials will always bring up when they talk about the relevance of Balikatan, na parang the ability of the U.S. to respond to any call for help ng Philippines in case of a major typhoon, let's say, an earthquake. It makes sure that the troops of the U.S. are familiar with the topography of the Philippines. So part ng exercise, kunwari, bukod sa live firing, for instance, meron din yung pag-transport mismo ng assets ng US, for instance, para ma-practice nila kung paano ba yun, kung anong bridge yung pwedeng gamitin, anong anong area ang best gamitin for given the assets or the vehicles, for example, that that they do have. So earlier during the press conference, yung nagsalita on behalf of the U.S. would be Lieutenant General Journey. What he was saying is that, well, yung motto niya daw is that if you don't get any better, you're getting worse. So, Balikatan has been mostly uninterrupted. Well, it hasn't been interrupted ever, even during the time of former President Rodrigo Duterte, where he threatened to essentially cut ties or minimize ties with the United States. Nag-persevere pa rin or natuloy pa rin yung Balikatan, although on a much, much smaller scale. Yung last year, the first Balikatan under President Marcos was touted na as one of the biggest. More or less kung personal involvement lang, it's the same this year. But again, they're saying it's a more complex operation happening all around for this iteration of the Balikatan. So, a lot of superlatives were said, of course. Merong best Balikatan ever, high expectations. It's a tangible demonstration of shared commitments of both the U.S. and the Philippines. But I think one thing that stood out from Lieutenant General Journey's statement was he was emphasizing how the Balikatan matters for regional peace and prosperity, given, again, the situation in the South China Sea, not just the West Philippine Sea, not just between the Philippines and China, but there are also other sources of tension, for instance, the Taiwan Strait. And so it's interesting that exercises will be held in the Batanes area for that. So over the coming weeks, we will be covering, or at least releasing to the public, images and videos of the different exercises across the Philippines. You won't be joining all. Obviously, some of them are not open to media, and some of them will be rather difficult to participate in the context of the complexities, again, of this Balikatan. Sinabi ni General Bronner, this is a show of unity and collective responsibility between the Philippines and the United States of upholding the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. So, more or less, that's what's happening so far in Balikatan. It's going to be an interesting 2 weeks. Kung bigger picture din, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will be visiting China on the 25th and the 26th, I believe, or late April rather, just in time as parang nag-set up yung Balikatan drills all over the Philippines. So that will be an interesting thing to see. Again, the focus here, although China will tell you otherwise, is that the focus is the partnership of the Philippines and the United States and the involvement of other countries that perhaps share the same vision and values of the two allies in the Indo-Pacific. But we do expect a reaction from China. We have actually yung Beijing nagsabi na parang there was already a loose reaction to the upcoming bilateral exercise. But again, the Philippines and the U.S. will tell you that this isn't about responding to any third party or third nation, but it's really about focusing on the cooperation and ability to work together of the two nations. So again, we will be posting actually a text version, kumbaga, of what we expect and the significance of this Balikatan. So do check that out if you're watching this live now or will be watching this later on. It should be up by then. If you have any questions at all or any things that you want to share about the Balikatan, about the bilateral sale between the Philippines and France. Now, by the way, I was asking, paano na-involve yung France dito sa Balikatan? I was told that, well, France asked to participate in this year's Balikatan exercise. So for more updates, you can log into, or you first download the Rappler Communities app and then check out the Rappler app and then check out the Communities tab. There's a Security and Global Affairs community subsection there, and then you can ask questions or if you have comments, if you happen to be in the vicinity of Batanes, Palawan, Ilocos Norte, Zambales, although medyo malayo to from civilian populations. If you have pictures from Balikatan that you would want to share, you can post it there. Again, this has been Bea Copin, reporting live from Camp Aguinaldo. Thank you so much for watching Rappler. Tune in. We will be giving you updates from the upcoming 2 weeks of the Balikatan exercises. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.